All right, thank you. Thanks for joining us for Building Successful AI-Powered Products. So I'm Kai, I'm a product manager here at Datadog, and I would love to welcome our panelists, Martin Ems, member of technical staff at Anthropic, and Luca, staff researcher at Assembly AI. All right, so welcome everyone to Dash. I know AI has been a big theme of our keynote, so I hope you guys are excited for more AI conversation. But this should be a fun one, right? We have folks from both Anthropic, nobody knows who they are, and Assembly AI, so I'm sure this will be a very productive conversation. So why don't the both of you introduce yourself really quickly?
Sure, I can start. My name is Martin. I've only been at Anthropic for like 3 weeks, so no drops on Claude 25 or something. Prior to Anthropic, I was at Matrix for a year as an entrepreneur in residence. So I did a lot of prototyping, tried to do the 12 products, 12-month thing. And before that, I was a platform architect at Stitch Fix. So that was kind of my foray into traditional machine learning.
Hi, I'm Luca. I'm from Assembly AI. Right now, I lead voice agent research and development. In the past, it was asynchronous models as well, but as you might heard, streaming systems, voice agents kind of took off. So now I'm focusing on that mainly. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So I'd love to start broad here. So there's been so much that's exciting about the AI space lately. What has been the most exciting AI development to each of you? So Luca, you want to kick things off?
Okay. I will give a very generic answer, but I'm truly excited about it. For sure, agentic and multimodal systems. We spent a lot of time, like in past decade or so, building very specialized models for each use case and being able to build something that performs really well on multiple things. And perhaps system that you can combine with other systems, and they just help each other work better and give results faster and better results generally. That's very exciting direction. And accessibility, for sure. That's something that was missing until 4 or 5 years ago, probably.
Claude 4, obviously. But beyond that, I think lately Microsoft really stunned me at Build a couple of weeks ago when they launched Microsoft Discover. I think they had this kind of AI chemistry agent that prototyped a new cooling compound. And I think it had to sequence through like 270,000 different variants and then ultimately picked one. They synthesized it and it actually worked in a real-world data center to replace kind of like BFA compounds in coolants, which I thought was really incredible.
Great. So I know AI agents is a hot topic right now. So I was listening to a podcast over the weekend where Mike Krieger talked about his equation for the utility of AI products. So it's model intelligence, context and memory, and UI. So maybe to both of you, how do you think about each of these parts? I know these 3 parts are critical to building any great AI product, right? So feel free to pick any single part if you want to talk about model intelligence, how to take advantage of that.
I think intelligence is obviously the main factor that we're pushing in the industry. If anyone's read Atomic Habits, I think it's like if every day you get 1% better, you're like 17 times better at the end of the year or something like that. And right now, AI capabilities for coding at least are doubling roughly every 70 days per cursor, which means somewhere in the region of 35 times better per year, which is kind of crazy. I think it's also really well known today that we have an overhang of capabilities in the models that means that every day, startups and entrepreneurs are able to discover new use cases and new emergent capabilities that we didn't know existed just from playing around, and I think that's super exciting.
Yeah, that was perfect answer. Cannot add more to it.
Anything to share around context and why that's important, or building great UIs around those products?
It's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? And context is combined with the prompt, the ingredients that you feed into hopefully an intelligent model, and that will yield a fantastic result. On the UI front, I think for the first time we're seeing the ability, and I'd love Luca to speak to this, of bidirectional voice calls with AI, like Bits today. I think one of my friends, Greg, he wrote a blog post that people are sleeping on email as an interface. And I think that's a really good point, because a lot of the times I don't really need to go to like a chatbot to ask a question. Like I'd love to CC it on email or have it handle it for me. And I think that's really novel that we haven't been able to do before.
Yeah, I agree. User-end implementation, like how easy you make it for people to use technology, is a very important factor, and that's why certain things really took off in the last few years. I mean, generally, I'm personally very lazy as well when it comes to tech. Like, I want to do as minimum amount of movements as possible to get the maximum outcome. Everybody's spending a lot of time kind of optimizing the systems in a way that how do we combine multiple things together? So you just do one thing, you just ask for one thing, and multiple things get done by the systems, right? So I think that's very important for adaptation and like increasing economic value of the systems as well.
Yeah, I think we're still relatively early with multimodal systems. I think sometimes people forget that Claude Code is multimodal or modal, where you can drop images in and it can actually read them. So how do you think about these new modalities as you're building out a product? Do you have an example where, maybe layering on a different modality, giving it access to vision or different audio really like enhances the user experience?
Well, for sure. Like technically speaking, there's pros and cons to everything. But overall, if you're building something that is more end-to-end, so there's no like discrete outputs, such as tell me if it's a cat or dog on the picture, you would want the system to have really good world model, right? So more modalities you give it, ideally that's a better way to do it. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of drawbacks. I can give a very specific example, which is a little bit more discrete than end-to-end LLMs, for example. It's for speech models, like pre-training, for example, certain parts of the system on text, and using that kind of real-world knowledge to then do downstream optimization for like speech transcription, for example, gives a lot of good advantages, right? That's obviously one side of the coin, but I would summarize it as it helps you build better world model and make better decisions across the modalities.
Great, yeah. So we'll definitely get more into model training later, but we know the AI landscape is changing so fast and so quickly. It's really hard to keep up. So what do you think builders should be thinking about when it comes to developing products? Like, what do you think some product principles, which ones have remained and which ones have you had to rethink completely when diving into a world where you're building AI products, where the technology is changing, the UI is changing every day, the capabilities are changing. So how should teams think about getting started?
First, real fast on the last question.
Yeah, for sure.
My favorite use case that I've worked on personally for multimodality is actually a New York company that I've just been advising for, and they are a supply chain logistics and visibility company. So they have to integrate with like tons of ERPs with different vendors, and ERPs generally have not the best schemas to work with if you're like a software engineer or data scientist. Also, columns made the same. They're very like horizontal, that kind of thing. So typically for onboarding new customers that have like an army of solutions architects that would go on site and do like a white glove integration. But because of Claude and the computer use capabilities, they were able to launch an ability where you could basically provide an IP address for your like Windows server somewhere that was running this ERP, and the agent was able to navigate through the ERP, like search for a particular PO order, look it up its status and its attributes, or write back. And that changed their kind of like their onboarding time from weeks to hours in many cases, which also made them drastically able to kind of accelerate on, through their sales pipeline, which I thought was really cool. And then I think the second question, let's see.
Yeah, second question is, when thinking about building AI products, what are some things that stay the same, has not changed in terms of product principles, and what have you had to rethink completely?
I think most of it stayed the same in the sense of you need to be customer obsessed, make something people want, and have a really tight feedback loop with your customers. However, I think it's a lot less forgiving these days. I think people are shipping at such an enormous pace. Like I think Kai single-handedly murdered like 25 startups today with like the dev agent and the ops SRE agent.
1,000.
1,000. So I think that is the key differentiator.
I very much agree. Well, a little bit more to it. Overall, I personally think about it as a providing immediate like monetary value, or like building some tech that is a little bit long term. So it provides technological value for the beginning, but provides monetary value in the long term. Like for example, quantum computing, that's one of the examples. It's extremely exciting tech. It's not there right now, but every sane person thinks that we should invest more in the direction, right? Because it's gonna provide more and more technological value, which will translate to monetary value later on. So I think optimizing on either side is basically that's the only two choices you have. Second is harder, although I agree, because compute costs a lot, and hiring a lot of talented people costs a lot. So usually the trick people use is they create some immediate like monetary value, like create an app that has users, and then use the revenue to kind of do some cool things in parallel. That's my usual preference. It kind of gives you best of both worlds. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think particularly, that the rate at which you can generate code on features is so unprecedented that I also think that users know this. So I think they're less forgiving for like wait lists, for example. Maybe unless you're Datadog and you launch everything to preview. But again, though, you kind of experiment with preview customers, you dog food it internally. Do you call it that? Yeah. I'm much less likely to give my information to a waitlist for a product versus like, give me the prototype, let me try it, let me see it.
And given how easy it is to now vibe code an app, how can companies differentiate? Where does that come from?
I think it still boils down to what kind of value it provides, but sometimes creating very cool app that works today, again, you could end up in somebody's bullet point, in presentation, and it's a big tech company's next day. Usually, I don't want to sound too negative about it, but usually things that take a really small amount of resources to create are easier to replicate, obviously, right? So differentiator is, what does it give me exactly as an end user from user's perspective, and perhaps from other perspective like investors or founders? How can I make sure I build this thing that lasts for few years until I have time to pivot, or add more features, make it more valuable?
I think it's speed. Vibe coding allows you to get a prototype out really quickly. But you really need to lock in and get really good at a particular use case. And whether you're disrupting yourself, you're ultimately in a race. And if you don't have a really tight feedback loop to continue iterating and building to continue providing value to retain the user, I think it's a very difficult environment to be in today.
Yeah, so it's really easy to bring a product, and demo it at a hackathon. It's much harder to build it for production. So how do you actually decide when something is production ready if you're actually looking to move a product to market? What are certain things you think about?
I think it drastically depends on what you're building. For example, if you're building a self-driving car, you probably need a much higher success rate with your products than if you're building, an outfit generator or something like that. With an outfit generator in particular, we actually make one at Stitch Fix, and originally we had human stylists that would curate outfits based on kind of what the models thought maybe the user would like, but didn't really know how to put together. And then over time, we built an outfits model, which could kind of stitch things together. And the way that we measured its success was by internally gamifying it. So we created a game, like a quiz, where you had to try and guess whether the outfit was made by a model or by a human. And as soon as we got to a point where it was kind of like a coin flip, we started kind of A/B testing it in production and seeing how often stylists would be like, sure, we'll send that outfit. And then like, how often did a customer buy that outfit? So I think it really depends on the complexity of your use case.
I think we agree on most of the topics here. It depends on use case, obviously. If it's something like education related or medical related, you need very rigorous testing systems to decide it's production ready. If it's not, and it's some, nobody's life is in danger, basically, you have more wiggle room there. Usually what question we ask whether product is ready for production or no is, okay, what do we want this system to do? What are we okay with it doing? And what are the things that we're terrified of it doing, right? And that spectrum kind of, moves around based on what's your use case. But yeah, again, if like it doesn't apply to use case where somebody's life could be in danger or stakes are very high, you could move pretty easily with just having answer to one question, which is what do we want this model to do?
Generally, I'm completely fine shipping something with vibes, and then I'll continue iterating until there are complaints about regressions. And as soon as somebody is kind of complaining, then I have my first test case to a certain extent. Like I typically start with guardrails, whether that's for safety or for latency or like various edge cases. And then you can just start with a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. And each time you get a thumbs down, that's probably a great test case to add to your eval suite.
Yeah, I think that brings us to a great topic. So we at Datadog spend a lot of time thinking about eval. So I think before we get into that, for the folks who are not familiar with eval, could each of you maybe go over a quick example or description of what eval is?
In very simple terms, I'll just copy paste what I said a few minutes back, but perhaps elaborate a little bit more. It's understanding how your system performs really, and understanding what is it really good at, what is it really bad at, and that kind of gives you understanding how it will become, better over time, what kind of failures it will have in, user end cases. And again, it depends on use case, obviously, but whole idea is just really, really understanding how the system performs. I'll stop there and perhaps elaborate a little bit more.
I think they're essentially unit tests for your LLM. Most importantly, they prevent regressions, but they also give you agility. If you're trying to evaluate moving to a different model, if you don't have evals, it's a really slippery slope. But I also think that you can zoom out a little bit, and ultimately product metrics are still evals, right? If you're building a customer support agent and they're not solving tickets, that's the strongest eval you need. And you should kind of use that empirical data to pick specific prompts and examples and test with different contexts, et cetera, to kind of work backwards and get early indicators of how your kind of iterations on your agent or your generative thing is going to ultimately impact your business metrics.
Yeah, but I'll add some points to it. I can't agree more. Even though it's my job to look at its quantitative data, just objective results, how these systems perform. Usually, I don't think like humans are inherently really good at designing very objective systems. So there has been many cases when we thought, oh, objectively, this system is like really, really good, but there's some very sneaky small use case where it's really, really bad and it's very jarring. So I think combining those two worlds, looking at objective metrics as well as looking at like qualitative. Yeah, not a native speaker, I'm sorry. It's very important to kind of have a understanding of how systems work in both scenarios.
Do you have an example where you had rigorous eval, but you found that it just didn't match real world expectations, and it just you rather just trust vibes over and like real world user feedback over looking at the numbers every day?
Well, one really funny use case is you usually test the system if it hallucinates or not, right? This applies to like non-discrete situations where it's either text generation or translation, or you have to generate something, right, so to say. And in one of the cases, hallucination rates were extremely low to a point where you can just statistically say it does not hallucinate at all. But there's still some very small number, right? So objectively, this looks fantastic. Oh, this is perfect model. But then turns out it was hallucinated person's name on like very specific types of silences. And that was pretty jarring to see, and everybody noticed it. But that we could not really see it with this objective evaluations because it looked really fantastic. Yeah, it's just one very simple example.
Kind of an aside, but I think the term hallucinated is really interesting that we decided to run with that as an industry. If I say that like 10 squared is 800, no one here is going to say I hallucinated. You're just going to say like I'm not very smart. And ultimately, I think that's generally kind of what we're working towards with models is like how do we make them more smart and less wrong, which leads to evals, where I think we're seeing a lot of overfitting. And overfitting is essentially where a lot of the training data has leaked into, either leaked into the pre-training or it's been aligned in the post-training, which means that when we're looking at these benchmarks in the industry and we're like, oh yeah, it's like suddenly beat every model, and then you actually use it, you're like, wait, but it doesn't actually know how to write Python. That's usually a sign of overfitting, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we have today, and also one of the biggest tips. If you have a problem where you're like, hey, like models aren't good at my particular use case, the very best thing you can do is build an eval suite and open source it, because there is no model company that wouldn't love more eval suites.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's now shift gears into how teams work together when building AI products. So we used to have a research team building products, with engineering and product and design, but now there's a research component. So how do researchers actually work with engineering teams in the real world? Maybe Luca, you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm gonna basically answer is it like round chicken in like no gravity situation answer, like what's the ideal case. Usually researchers and engineers work really closely together, even from the beginning. It's about area of expertise, right? For example, if there was no like engineering limitations or infrastructural limitations, I would love to deploy like 50 billion parameter model. Why not? But you can't do that, right? So then the question becomes how we move forward by taking some signal from engineering teams and providing some info from us. So we have really good way to decide which direction to move towards and what we can give up, so to say, to create a system that satisfies the requirements, right? So it's usually a lot of meetings, but very interesting meetings, and moving towards the end goal, like very closely, like working very closely at every step.
I think it's just comes back to velocity again and speed. If you're trying to build this flywheel, you need your researchers to be focusing on the right problem. And the way that you get feedback that your model is getting better at, identifying chickens instead of donkeys is by getting in the field with customers via your product team. Hopefully, building integrations with the new cameras or whatever through your engineering team, and then rapidly iterating back to find, the negative cases so that your research team, has the internal evals to continue to iterate. But ultimately, it just comes back to velocity again.
Yeah, maybe give us a little glimpse into how research decisions are made. So how do you pick out of everything you could invest, what to invest research resources into? How do you pick your bets?
It depends on your customer, right? Who are you trying to please and who are you going after? Generally, are we talking about training models here? Or?
Yeah.
So there's only so much public data that you can acquire. Then you need to kind of choose your proprietary data that you're going to purchase or generate synthetically. And then you're going to need like an army of labelers. So you kind of have, there's a cost trade-off versus a time to market trade-off. And you can only do so many of those things concurrently. So really it comes back to that flywheel of, okay, what is your product team like meeting with the customers in the field? Like what do they really need? And then you're probably going to back to your research team and have them acquire the data or synthetically generate it or create the RL environments or whatever it may be to kind of create the emergent capabilities in the model, which then the engineering team can then prototype against and build into the product. And, around it goes.
It really depends on use case, obviously, again, and this situation based on, what's the stage of the company, what is the product exactly, what velocities and outcomes are we exactly looking for. Usually my thumb rule of deciding if what is worth pursuing in terms of some exploration areas, how to resolve certain problems is, well, you pretty much just try to be as informed as possible and make a bet that just increases your chance of getting it right. We know a lot about deep learning today, but still not really a lot. So it's kind of, outcomes are not 50-50, but it just boils down to what are the risks associated with certain decisions, right? So I kind of agree very much that understanding the whole pipeline and whole situation and thinking from what we want to get and working your back, from there is usually a really good approach. And that kind of helps you understand what are the risks I can take. And based on that, it's easier to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So now looking ahead, what are you most excited about, right? There's so much happening in the AI space. What's happening in the next 12 months?
I think we're looking at, I'll give you an example of, I use this app on my Mac called Rocket typically, and it's like a Slack emoji thing that works globally. So I can be in iMessage or Gmail and just colon, smiley face, and it just appears, which is awesome. But Anthropic naturally has very strict security requirements, so that app isn't allow listed. So I was going into a meeting with my manager, and I'm like, I wonder. So I opened Claude Code, and I just put in 4 sentences. It's make me a global Swift app that generates Slack emojis anywhere I want. And I came back after the meeting, and I had this app, and it just worked, which kind of blew my mind. I don't write Swift, and I haven't read any of the Swift, but it works. And that kind of blew my mind. And I think that we're getting to over the next 6 to 12 months, everyone said it's a year of agents. I think we're going to see agents that, they're pretty good at keeping context for like 30 minutes, maybe an hour today. I think you're going to see agents that can run for 4, 8, 12 hours, which is really going to change the game, both in how quickly you can ship features, but the concurrency in which you can develop new products or pretty much anything you want. And that's super exciting for me. Like I quite frequently work in 3 code bases at once, which is kind of ludicrous when you think about it.
Absolutely, I would say like agentic systems and also like more modalities is really fun direction. I believe we've seen a lot of development in that area, and we're still gonna see it happening. It personally excites me a lot because sometimes we see these systems make really dumb mistakes, right? It's like, why would you do that? And that is because the lack of understanding of the world model, right? So there could be like 100 different type of solutions to this, but what is most promising right now is, like multiple systems working together and having multiple different modalities, which kind of increases the understanding of the world of the system, right? So I would be very happy in like 12 to 18 months to see like more advanced versions of current systems that kind of give us ability to iterate much quicker and make less mistakes.
12 to 18 months.
Yeah, it's just iterative improvement, right?
Yeah, so with model intelligence going up every 3 months, AI models being better at using tools, holding longer context memory, how should teams be thinking about building on top of these APIs, right? Like products that didn't work 3 months ago now work with the next model release. How should teams be getting ahead of these improvements?
By API, did you mean MCP? I misheard you.
API, MCP.
I'm just kidding. I think MCP, all the things for sure. It does appear to be the industry standard now for interconnecting agents together. I have a friend's company who they were basically trying to build virtual colleagues. It's called Teammates. I think teammates.org is the website. And they had all these different personas. It's like you hire a salesperson or like a designer, a marketer, and they had this Shopify store, which the idea was that had these agents that could self-run the Shopify store. So do market research, like what's a funny meme, cool, send that to the designer agent, then like with GPT-4o generate a t-shirt, send it off to the printer, restock based on low inventory, et cetera. And like it just wasn't really working. And then I think, I don't know if it was like GPT-4o or what model it was, maybe it was 3.5 Sonnet or something, but just one day, like it just suddenly started working and they're like, wow, we just got a new t-shirt. They just ordered it. Like people are buying it and they just kind of like blew their minds. But I think it's a really good example of building ahead of where the models are today and then just kind of being taken along for the ride, like old boats ride with the tide kind of thing. That's where it starts.
Just to clarify, is the question more about how to use these existing systems or kind of decision making, whether you should do it, by yourself or perhaps?
Yeah, like how to think about the evolving ecosystem, right? Models are getting better. What should you be thinking about?
Obviously, I'm kind of repeating this a lot, but this is really fundamental to me. What kind of value you want to create and when, and work from there. Usually, I agree. This is sometimes very complex and very advanced systems kind of become really, really good overnight on certain things. And, we've had situations, this was complete disaster a few days ago. Now it's like almost perfect. So investing into directions, services more rather than directions that have proved that are improving from time to time is always a good idea to start building with. then perhaps making it more fun by adding some stuff by yourself.
Cool. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we leave enough time for audience questions. So if you have a question, we have 2 microphones over here. Feel free to just walk up and ask either of our panelists a question. All right, go ahead.
Hey, Al, thanks for speaking. Luca, you mentioned a few times world model and the importance of a good one. What is that, and how do I know if I have a good one?
Yeah, I kind of romanticized the word a little bit, to be fair. I think generally having an understanding of how certain things work at a very fundamental level helps you not make horrible mistakes, right? Like, I don't have to be expert at everything to survive as a person because I have understanding of, some simple things, evolutionary plus, my fundamental intelligence. So kind of putting that into systems at some level will help you get better results for sure.
My instinct is to just drown it in data. Take all my database data, throw it into a prompt, but that doesn't scale for a lot of reasons. How do you balance this token count versus processing power versus a lot of this data is relevant, and I don't necessarily know which data is relevant until the model has seen it?
Well, that has extremely long answer.
Okay, fair enough.
To be honest, it's just iterative improvement and kind of decision making, what to push into models' weights and what to just use on the fly. I would say, yeah, it's very boring iterative approach and analysis, but we can't run away from that, unfortunately.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, sir.
I would just go to Hugging Face, get the world view model eval set, and just make sure you pass it.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all, for this. My question, Martin, is to what you spoke about a little bit before. And I think you're right. I think these agents that run in this, let's call it 5 to 20 minute time frame, we're there, or we're close enough to where people expect it, right? They expect it to work. And in this idea of moving fast with velocity, when we're talking about agents running for hours, right? Like, that's what's really interesting right now. Like, cause we're getting into Datadog's shown this, but we're getting into, like, I log on for the day and my agent is doing something alongside of me. What thoughts do you think would be helpful to keep in the front of your mind when we're trying to manage relative context over that time, and obviously not blow through the context, but keep that agent, like, when we have to recycle sessions, and keep that agent like top of mind?
So I think, first of all, we need the workflows, the agentic workflows we're designing to be a lot more proactive. Today, we have to be really reactive. We have to go start the task, then go check in if it got stuck. We don't really have, we haven't built the right oversight and interface tools to really interact with it well. But in terms of the context length, again, build to the edge of the window that you can, because that is something obviously the research is focusing on, and we're seeing that window expand pretty rapidly. But the common strategy is compacting, right? Compact, summarize, save memories, and then you can kind of recall those as and when. And the other pattern is subagents, right? So if you have a reasonably large problem set, break it out into 10, 15, 20, whatever tasks, subtasks, and each of those can be, individual agents. And then you really just have an aggregator, supervisor model on top, which also allows you kind of to delegate to different models that may be better at Python or Rust or Go or image gen or whatever. And it keeps you pretty agnostic, and the context window of your kind of supervisor shouldn't get that big as a result.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi. So I have a question from a user adoption perspective. So for example, the company that I work for, Tapestry, we're building AI. And we've noted, or at least I've noticed, that early adopters are usually very excited to use AI, and they're on that bandwagon. But then how do you navigate the users that are more hesitant? They don't really want to test it out. They're really fearful of AI. How would you navigate that?
One way I think is gentle nudging. So like, I don't know what, I haven't used Tapestry, sorry. But for example, at Stitch Fix, we were generating stylus notes. So right, if Stitch Fix sends you a box of clothes and they send you a nice note like, hi Kai, like, hope you had a great summer, like here's an outfit for your wedding, that kind of thing, based on chat history or what we'd sent previously, time of year, that kind of stuff. We had a goal of trying to make those generated, and a lot of people didn't like it. So we essentially we just started pre-filling the text area of notes with an AI suggestion. And then we just measured, like, what's the delta? Like, how many characters are changing? How many people are accepting it? How many people are deleting it? And we did over time find the holdouts rapidly were like, wait, this is awesome. I don't have to, like, do this myself. So I think you can kind of, like, handhold.
All right, so unfortunately, we're out of time today. Thank you all for attending our session. We'll be around the expo floor, so if you want to find any one of us to chat more, we'll be around. So again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.